Today we're going to talk a little about living fossils. So when we talk about the power of evolution through natural selection, it conjures up the immense image of change. We like to think about how over the course of billions of years, simple molecules came together and have given way to the vast variety of life on Earth. But to think of evolution and natural selection only acting directionally in this way, we run into a bit of a conundrum. So how do we explain the presence of living fossils? Well, these are species of organisms that appear to be similar to a species otherwise known only from fossils. And there are plenty of examples. So here on the right is Ginkgo biloba, which I think is planted throughout CSUN campus. And here on the left is a fossil that is very similar, dating back 250 million years. Another example can be seen in the fish coelacanth, and here on the bottom, its fossil record goes back 400 million years. And there are plenty of other examples of this occurring. So all of these organisms have appeared to have gone through very little evolution over the years. Now, does this mean that these organisms have been left behind by evolution, as their name suggests? Of course not. This would be in sharp contrast with evolutionary genetic principles. But this does make us look at how selection can actually be a force of conservation as well as change. So now living fossils are said to be organisms which are experiencing morphological stasis. Now, this is the maintenance of a standard morphology over vast periods of time. And there are several proposed mechanisms for how this can occur. The first is stabilizing selection. So under stable environmental conditions, often stable environmental conditions, we can see selection acts against both extremes in variation of a phenotype, and instead will select for the common or the normal. So another mechanism is ecological niche conservatism. Now, this is just that often the descendants of these fossilized relatives live in very similar ecological conditions. And the last is that there's genetic and developmental constraints which will limit the possible phenotypes that can be created. So none of these. So if morphological stasis is actually an illusion, what is actually happening here? So to get a better idea, let's go back to our example of the coelacanth fish. Now, morphological stasis in this particular species was thought to have occurred through low molecular diversity and lower than average mutation rates. However, there's a recent study by some French scientists that was published in 2013, which contradicts this. And they have proof that not only is the genome of this fish changing at comparable rates to other species, that morphological changes did occur. And here's what they found. So here on the left, we have the modern coelacanth fish, and here on the right, we have the fossil. Not only is the modern 3 times bigger than the fossil species, but you can see highlighted here, they've tracked several bones and how they've differed over time in the skulls. And then over here, this is the difference that you can see in spines. So there's actually a lot of different things that can make these physically distinct from one another. And the same thing can be said with another example, the tuatura. Now, this is a reptile that's endemic to New Zealand, and it's also considered a living fossil when compared to many relatives from the Jurassic and Triassic period. But if you look at the remains more closely, first you'll notice that they have a different number of teeth, and there are also, just the same way as the coelacanth, there's a number of differences between their skulls. And research has also shown that their genome is said to be changing at a faster rate than any other vertebrate. So the take-home message here is that molecular changes and physical changes do not always reflect one another. This is why there has been a push by many scientists to retire the term living fossil, in the same manner that we saw earlier in the course with the use of the word primitive. So let's just cross it out. So although many today's living fossils may look primitive and may have a conserved body plan, it is of utmost importance to kind of look at this with a phylogenetic tree thinking eye and remember that they are not the same as the ancient species from which they descend. So just because they are very similar does not mean they are the same. So today we've talked about what living fossils are, we've looked at a couple examples, and hopefully I've helped to clarify how the term is a bit of a misnomer and that these animals and organisms are indeed evolving, although they might look similar to those of the past.